Good evening. I'm Matthew Spaulding. I'm Associate Vice President and Dean for Hillsdale College here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Alan P. Kirby Center for Constitutional Studies and Citizenship, where we often talk about constitutional studies, but also like to talk about citizenship and those things that are necessary for citizenship and for the right type of education about the liberal arts, which is our topic this evening. In particular, it's about the art of words, a book discussion on classical education and children's books. But of course, we're very happy to also have a book launch, although this is only the DC book launch, for this wonderful new book, Mr. Mehan's mildly amusing mythical mammals. Matthew Mehan, the book says, if you look in the back, is a poet, scholar, teacher, and musician. He's a Ph.D. from the University of Dallas. He is a teacher at the Heights School in Potomac, Maryland. And he is also the Worsham Teaching Fellow here at Hillsdale College, the Kirby Center, where he teaches literature. I understand from his wife, Molly, that he also sings in the shower. That's the musician part. John Miller, on the other hand, when we had this discussion, we wanted to talk about the book, and we also wanted to get a lot more out of Matt, because he has a lot more to tell us and teach us. We had the idea that we should have him interviewed, and that this would be more interesting. And we thought John would be the perfect person. John runs the Dow Journalism Center at Hillsdale College and teaches about journalism. He's also a fellow, does a lot of work with National Review, where in particular he also runs two podcasts, The Bookmonger and The Great Books, both of which are excellent. But he thinks a lot about books and interviews authors about their books. So we thought this would be a perfect occasion to have that conversation. So again, welcome. The book is wonderful. I greatly endorse it, and please enjoy the evening. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matt Spaulding. Hello, welcome, everybody. Can you hear us okay? Yes. All right, so my goal tonight is for all of you to have a mildly amusing evening with us. Matt, let's talk about your book. Congratulations on the publication of it. Authors, when they write books, are often advised to have an elevator pitch, right? We hear this in Hollywood also. Everybody needs an elevator pitch so that on the occasion of your getting stuck in an elevator and you have 30 seconds with a book elevator, with a book editor or a movie producer, and you've got 30 seconds to get this person's attention. What do you say about your book? What is your elevator pitch for Mr. Mehan's mildly amusing mythical mammals?
That's right, yeah. Overpromise and underdeliver, or underdeliver and overpromise. Right? Yeah, it's a book about mythical mammals. It's an alphabet, one poem for each letter of the alphabet, and it's a journey of two of them, the Blug, this guy, and the Dally, that guy, who go on a little journey of friendship, and they learn a lot about how to master their emotions, right, and how to essentially encounter difficulties and have a happy and joyful life. That's the sort of meta-narrative of the whole thing. But the other part of the pitch is it's a family book, not just a kid's book. That is, it's something that adults can get a lot out of, adolescents and teenagers can get a lot out of, children in the middle grades, and even the littles, because there's alphabets, there's rhyme and fun, fuzzy little mammals. And it's something that for the whole family you can engage at whatever level. And throughout your life, hopefully, you can come at it as a child, you can come at it as an adolescent, and you can come at it again and again as an adult. It's a swimming pool, there's a shallow end, and there's a deep end.
Excellent. So is that a good elevator pitch? Should we continue? Good. So let's go on. I want to ask about the title, Mr. Mehan's mildly amusing mythical mammals. So you like alliteration?
Yes, guilty as charged. My name is Matthew Mehan.
Right. So
blame my parents.
So let's unpack the title a little bit. Mildly amusing. I mean, that's an underselling of the book, I think.
Yeah. Look. Mr. Mehan's mildly amusing mythical mammals, to be mildly amusing and have that in the middle, mildness is actually something that the poetic arts teach people, right? That how do you communicate something in a way that doesn't require force, manipulation, pushiness, violence. Sometimes you have to be violent, right? There's war and there's serious things. But there's a whole other realm of peace that involves the arts of rhetoric and poetry and image and communication. So I wanted to focus on mildly because I don't think I'm saying anything that's surprising here in this room. No one's going to be shocked to find out we are sort of degrading ourselves into a harsh age that gets pretty pushy and violent in our speech, right? Well, look, I'm not for safe spaces, but I am for artful speech that actually persuades people. So I wanted mildness because I think that's something that the poetic arts teach. And amusing is at the middle of the title in the idea of to be amusing is fun, but it's also a pun on musing, inspiration, right? And so you want something that's both delightful and instructive, right? Something that's fun and goofy and not too painful, but then has a much higher register because it's channeling things that are, in essence, divine.
So do you actually invoke the muses at the start of the book? I guess you kind of do with the title subliminally, but do you have a deliberate evoking of the muses like you're an epic poet right at the front of this thing?
There is a kind of very subtle one in, the first image that you encounter in the entire book is a little caduceus.
What is a caduceus?
Yeah, okay, so visual aids are very helpful, I've learned. So
you mean the pattern?
This pattern right here
on the end paper,
and then it winds up being the second thing you see as well, and it's a little glyph of an image of Matthew 10:16. Behold, I send you out as sheep among the wolves. Be ye wise as serpents, innocent as doves. That is a very low-grade, subtle reference to the source of inspiration, which is God, right? And yes, beyond that too, there's lots of inspiration. I try to make allusions to poets and all the people that helped inspire this book, but there is a kind of very serious call for divine aid that starts the book.
I'm impressed. You've thought really hard about what you're putting into this book, it sounds like. Yes. Share with us a piece of the book, if you will. It's full of poetry. It's got these great pictures. We're not going to do a whole reading for you, but can you share a piece of the book with us? Give us read a portion, a poem maybe.
Sure. Yeah, I can try and recite one, or I can.
You have it memorized.
Sure, some of them. I mean, some of them I'm still working on them. But,
well, pick a good one.
Well, I mean, it might be good to start simple and just do the Dally. Which is, he's right there, he's the lead character.
It's this one.
Yeah, and he has necktie ears, because if you don't know, that's a symbol of the Western tradition, if you want to really nerd out, but that's another story maybe. And they're yellow and blue, the sign of cheerfulness and the sign of sorrow and sadness. So already he's got a little bit of a struggle on his hands.
All right, so the Dally, to me, looks like a dog.
Yes, with a very different and odd body. But
okay.
Yeah, every one of the mammals except for one are actually admixtures of different kinds of creatures.
Because this is clearly a hippo.
And a blowfish, yeah.
And a blowfish.
Yeah, and some other things too. And a bumblebee or a little gnat. He's got little gnat wings.
It's got the little wings. That's the blug.
The blug, yeah, and he's got little monitor lizard feet. And
okay.
Each of them are mixed together, which is what one of the things poetry does. It's a mixing and a remixing of old and new.
And these creatures never have been seen in the wild.
Not that I know of.
All right, so
except for one.
You want to tell us about the Dally?
Yeah, so let me recite the Dally.
So so the book goes through the ABCs, and so D is for Dally, obviously, and this is the poem for the letter D.
That's right.
Okay.
And you go first. The ABCs are kind of an introduction, and then you meet our hero, the Dally, the letter D creature. So if I screw it up, this will be
no one will know
karmic,
unless they're reading along.
Yeah. Among the pelting drops of rain, the Dally can be seen again. The rocks, the trees, they know him well, but where he'll show no one can tell. For though the forest soaked and sopped, the Dally skirts each drop that's plopped. But if you are one keen of eye, who sits and stoops in storms, you'll spy the dodgy dally dancing dry. That's it. Very
Nice.
simple.
All right, so what does all that mean?
In one sense, not much. He's a creature, it's a light poem, right? There's light verse. He's a little creature who likes to dodge the rain. When he starts out, you find him laughing and dodging raindrops, no problem. The very next poem, he meets the evil. And the evil actually tempts him into sitting down and having a long chat with evil.
Evil is E-V-O-L.
That's right.
In the book, right?
That's right.
Okay.
The evil. And he has a long conversation, and in that conversation, he hears all of the saddest kinds of things that you could possibly imagine. And by stopping, he's rained on, because there is a rainstorm, but he's also even cried on the tears of the evil, who is the saddest creature. And so the rest of the book is the Dally trying to recover from meeting the evil and hearing the most, sort of, in one sense, the biggest lies you could imagine, that everything is fundamentally sad, right? That the whole world is tragedy, right? Bereft of comedy. And the evil actually is a blind ape. He's a cave-dwelling troglodytic ape. That's a word you can look up in the glossary in the book. He's a troglodyte. He's a cave dweller. No eyes. And so he claims he can see the whole world, but in reality, he's horrifyingly blind.
I know what a troglodyte is because I played Dungeons and Dragons in the 1980s. So I don't.
Nerds unite.
Yeah, I do not need to look up that word, but you do have a whole glossary in the back of this book, and it takes up, I want to say, about a third of the book even.
More than a fourth, less than a third. Yep.
Is okay.
Yeah.
So why so much glossary? Why so many hard words?
Yeah.
Mr. Mehan?
That's right. No, that's right. So the reason being, I want people to love words, and I want people to learn how to express themselves. And there was actually a very powerful phenomenon in pedagogy and education for a while that said, hey, keep things stupid and thematically simple. Like, just keep it simple, stupid for everybody, and don't give children all of the sort of rolling out the toolkit of language for ideas. But in reality, I'm with, Richard Weaver and 1,000 others who say the tools of civilization, and the tools not just of the exterior civilization, but civilization of the soul, like how do you actually govern yourself, requires infinite numbers of instruments. And those instruments are represented by words. So I want children, adults, I want people to engage words and grow their vocabulary, because it's like Orwell said, right? If you can remove the words, you can essentially erase the memory out of a culture. So I want people to have the gift of words. So
this is a balancing act, though, isn't it? Because I know as a journalist,
right,
you never want to use a really hard word. You don't want to alienate your audience, right? And one of the goals in journalism is to meet your readers where they're at, on the one hand. On the other hand, there are times when maybe you do need to use a little tougher word, or it's not really the fault of the writer that you don't understand it. Maybe it's the fault of the reader, and the reader ought to look up something. So you're trying to inspire people to what? Expand vocabularies and study for the SAT with your book?
there's definitely that. Yeah, I mean, there is that aspect. Actually, I want it to be useful. Right? There's a kind of misperception of the liberal arts today that it has to be exquisitely and exclusively useless. Like, actually, that's part of it. It is just noble and a glorious thing for free people to do. So a beautiful, elegant word that you might not know is a good thing to learn. But it's also, I would like people to become educated and aid them. So yes, SAT builders, you bet. But on the higher level, in one sense, journalists don't have the advantage of a bunch of gorgeous pictures, rhyme, poetry, fancy. I'd make it easy because you have to deal with a word, but you kind of want to know what it means because you're engaged in a free and delightful exercise. So, the old joke, never use a $10 word when a $1 word will do. Well, yeah, but where do you learn those $10 words? We're getting to a point now where no one knows the $10 word, right? Everyone just has $1 bills, and they can't use the perfect word when you have to or you really should.
In one of my courses at Hillsdale College, I have students read some Samuel Johnson. and they read an essay from the Rambler that he wrote in the 1750s or something like that. And it's on this very question about, do you want to speak to your audience in language it will understand, or when do you challenge, and how as a writer do you make these decisions? And I was reminded of that when I was looking through your glossary, because you quote Samuel Johnson like crazy.
That's right.
In the glossary.
100%. Yeah, I use 2 dictionaries for it, and then I also add my own glosses and stories and poems and little treasures and interpretive aids for the poems. And like I said, there's a lot of depth. You can go full nerd if you want. If you love the liberal arts at nerd levels, you can do it. But I use Dr. Johnson's dictionary, which is the first major dictionary of the English-speaking, the Anglophone world. And then I use Webster's dictionary, which is the first great American dictionary. So I try to introduce people to the tradition of the Anglophone world, our language, which is an enormous treasure. And that's one of the things I start the book with too, is we more or less start at Eton and at Oxford, which are, I think, sort of primordial, Lazarus pits for, where our language comes from and our culture and ideas. So, because I want that in.
So normally the glossary is like the boring part of the book that nobody wants to bother with, but I think it's maybe the best part of this book. I really enjoyed reading it. It's funny, and you're playing word games and hiding meanings and so forth.
That's right. I thank you. You may be the 5th or 6th person in the world to have read through the whole glossary. That's great. But the glossary is written as a way to look up words that are in the poems, but it also, if you want, high level, nerd work, if you want to just read through it, I've written it sort of like the book of Proverbs is written, like just random things that seem disconnected, but if you just hang with it, you actually start to see patterns and you're actually led somewhere. Even though the one's about like reaching into a wall and getting bit by a snake, and the other one's about, having a fractious wife and you want to live on the roof instead of be with her. But my wife's wonderful, so don't worry about it. But like all these disconnected things that actually, when you put them together, are painting a picture of the whole. I try to give an image of the Western tradition, the ars rhetorica, ars poetica, and Christian humanism, and what it is to be a human being in community and in a self-governing environment, which is,
So there are illustrations in the glossary, but really the glossary is very texty compared to the rest of the book. And in fact, these beautiful paintings are with the poetry at the front when you're telling the actual story of the book. So tell us a little bit about these paintings. You don't have you have an illustrator who's not you. You did the words. Someone else did the page. So who is he, and how did you guys conspire?
John Foley was the head of the art department at the Heights School, and he and I.
Which is where you teach.
Where I teach
in
now,
the daytime.
To this day, I still teach there, and he and I would sit for lunch and talk about Holbein and Christian humanism and Homer and William Carlos Williams. We just have these awesome lunches.
Because don't we all have these conversations on our lunch breaks?
Come work with me. But we would talk about these things, and we also talked about how the arts, like there are weaknesses, there are holes in the sort of, put it this way, team good guy. I refer to team good guy and team bad guy. I'm not going to tell you which one you are, but there's a sort of like people who really want the good. They tend to be fighting with just their left arm or right arm. And the arts are this whole avenue of goodness that people don't use very well. So we talked about this for a long time and decided let's collaborate. Let's do this. He wound up leaving. I wanted him to be the illustrator before he wound up leaving. He left and became apprentice under Paul Ingbretson up in New Hampshire, you can trace his line all the way through the Boston School, the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, all the way back direct line to the workshops of Florence, to Raphael's workshop. And so he's a realist impressionist, rock star master. And that's his word, but so he and I decided we were going to do this together, and we spent a whole year doing practices. We did political cartoons to see if we could get my mind and his paintbrush merged together, and it actually took a long time to get that. And so now we've got 26 oil paintings, one for each letter of the alphabet, and a bunch of pen and ink letter blocks. And each painting is chocked full of, delightful colors, beautiful. He's a master of light and dark. That's what his real strength is. So there's all this incredible luminosity in the paintings. But it's also chocked full of symbolism of the Western tradition too.
So give an example of what you mean. Pick one of these pictures here and tell us what. Okay, in this one,
I pulled the blood because that's
what is the symbolism? So I'm seeing the tortoise and the hare. I don't know, what else am I supposed to see?
Yeah. So this is Christ's Church Meadow Walk, and this is
in the back. And okay.
This is Oxford Christ Church College, and this is one of the birthplaces of the English language and the arts and letters of the English-speaking world. This is actually Peter Tiniel's original illustration quoted from Lewis Carroll, and then obviously Aesop's Fables. So the blug, the bumbling by as slow as a slug, is the tubbiest creature known as the blug. He plods a humorous pace, so slow in fact that he came in third place against the tortoise and the hare, who at the finish line stood and stared at this globular, jolly, gelatinous jug. His body he lugged.
Are you quoting your own poem again?
I am guilty.
Okay.
So you gotta sell it.
And we are selling it after, aren't we?
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah, I think we're selling. Okay.
But the blug, he is the sort of Sancho Panza of the whole thing. He's the buoyant, cheerful, sun-colored, sun-shaped, big, fat, buoyant guy. And he is what I think poetry is, which is a kind of combination of very heavy things, and this is a very heavy, fat mammal, right? But done in a winsome and light way, right? You can talk about serious questions of like pride and tyranny and kingship, and you can do it in an Aesop's fable about a stork and some frogs, right? So you can teach really heavy stuff through very lightsome stuff. The blug floats sort of above Aesop's fables, like mere lesson, just the moral, right? Because whimsy and fantasy and the formation of the imagination is more than that, right? And in the background too is the transcendent, right? Christ's church, college, right? Sort of these sorts of higher philosophical and theological considerations. And there is a finish line, there's a telos, there's an end to the arts. It's not aimless, even though the arts tend to go slow and take you in a very strange and circumlocucious way. So is every kid going to get this? Absolutely not. No. But a teacher who wants to use this book can open up the mysteries and secrets of the West to their students, and most people can just enjoy a wonderful poem about a cheerful creature that knows how to cheer up another sad little mammal.
So I love his teensy-weensy little arms.
T-Rex arms. That's
and have you ever heard the joke, why can't T-Rex do push-ups? Because he's extinct. But he does have T-Rex arms. So your illustrator John Foley, nice last name, John Foley.
Isn't that perfect? Mehan Foley.
Yeah, it's almost like a pen name, right? But that's his real name.
Yeah, it's his real name. I goof on it a lot in the glossary.
So to what extent is this a collaboration? Are you telling him what to do here, or he's executing the painting, but are you guys both talking about?
No, I work up a very extensive file. I show him so when you write a poem, you actually, a good poem, you don't just write one poem. Maybe you do occasionally.
I write 0 poems.
Okay, fair enough. But oftentimes you'll write ideas for the poems, almost like a painter. A painter will paint up a host of beautiful oils that are in preparation for the big mural, right? You do that with poetry too. So I share those with him, all the sort of build-up poems that led to the final poem, so he gets the sense of what I'm thinking and how I'm, thinking about this poem. And then I also give him direct visual quotes. I show him pictures of Christ Church Meadow Walk in Oxford. I show him Peter Tiniel. We pick from a host of old steeplechase finish line signs. So we do a lot of work together. In fact, there's just this enormous Google Doc of like 196 pages of all of our notes for every illustration. And we go back and forth, and it's a process.
So at some point we're going to have the director's cut edition of your book, right?
Yeah,
It'll be 10 times as long.
That's right.
So for how long were you guys working on this together? It sounds like years.
Years, yeah. Years and years.
And you said something interesting just a few moments ago. You haven't seen him in 3.5 years until recently, but
Yeah.
you worked remotely and
He left the Heights, and he was up absolutely busy, starting a new family, starting his new full-time artist business. He's a studio artist now, and he's up there, and I'm down here, and I've got my kids, and I've got all my work. So for 3+ years, we were just email, phone every day, just hammering it out.
all right. Now you said early on there's a family book, and I know you don't like to refer to this as a children's book or a kid's book. Publishing, marketing conventions almost force us to.
Yeah, you have to.
But you call it a family book. Why do you like that term?
One, family time and families are, I feel, basically under attack by, you can point to like evil forces of sort of Mordor's orcs, out there. But even just the basic kind of hubbub and hustle of life, there's a robbing of the family of its time together. So I wanted a book where adults could read to children and every member of the family would get something out of the book, as opposed to everything having to be divided, right? And just things like television are the shared activity. I wanted a book that could be shared. That was one reason, that's straight up, that's what I'd like for my family. I think it's a good thing. But also part of the poetic arts and the rhetorical arts that would be great to recapture for free society and free government and Republican self-government in the United States of America would be the habit of knowing how to talk at a variety of levels at one time. To say to one speech act that is communicating this to these people, that to these people, this to these people, this to my child, this to my wife, all at once. And that's actually something that poetry and rhetoric teach. And so I wanted to lead by example and try to do that, where a kid is going to get a fun little fable, right? Or just an amusing nonsense poem. An adolescent is going to start to see that there's wordplay and structure and poetry and different interesting craft going on. A little bit older than that, after a middle grade, high school and above, they're going to start to see serious themes of psychology, of politics, of the truth.
It sounds a little bit like a Pixar film, right? The best Pixar films will make the littlest kids laugh hysterically, but they'll also keep the interest of the adults with jokes and storylines and allusions that they miss, that the adults get.
Yeah, it used to be part of my elevator pitch, but now that Brad Bird's so popular, it looks like I'm just kind of, he's back. I mean, he was always popular, but now that he's got a new film, I feel like I'm grabbing his coattail too much. But
I don't know.
I used to say, this is like a Brad Bird film that I pitch it to the adults, but the kids will love it. And just
Why
like
is that not a
Incredibles.
part of your elevator pitch? My goodness,
It is
that's,
now.
I totally get it now.
Yeah, okay, that's right, sorry.
Finally, I get what you're doing.
Just trying to stake my own claim in this world.
The poetry is in so many ways dead. Nobody reads it anymore, except in one place, and that's in children's literature.
Right.
It's Dr. Seuss. It's all kinds of children's lit. That's where it lives. What does poetry do? Why is it such a magical, powerful medium that we should study and try to recover?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one of the reasons why I decided to stake out in children's poetry, because it's a free space where you don't have to comply with, oftentimes some strange subcultural rules that poetry is not popular anymore. There isn't popular poetry that's for everyone. At least it doesn't seem that way to me anymore.
Well, who can name a working poet today, right? A few people can name one or two. You can't, right?
Yeah, there's like Billy Collins is as close as you get. He's a humorist.
I don't know who that is.
Anyway, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
He goes out with Bill Murray now to kind of.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, right. Because you got to attach yourself to a comedian, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, So, a number of things. One, poetry. You asked earlier about the title, and another word in the title, Mr. Mehan's mildly amusing mythical mammals. We forget we're mammals. We forget we have a body, right? That's something. It's actually super important. People are trying to. You could see a whole international movement of like, whoa, there's a body that has rules that we should follow, and it's important, right? But poetry speaks to the full human being. right? It actually speaks to the mind, but it has rhyme and meter and rhythm and all of these things, and it even has visual structure. Unlike prose, which is just whatever the pages set, usually, right? Poetry is, I can make an image. In fact, I have one of the poems is a concrete poem. It's actually shaped like the creature, just to show you the full, panoply of things you can do with poetry. But by actually engaging the full body and mind of a human being, there is a certain kind of delight, I think, which is exquisite. Like, it's actually a very delightful thing to have poetry once you get a handle on it and figure out how to engage it, which is, I try to, in the glossary, even give like help for really re-engaging poetry as an art in the family. But also, it's a way that actually teaches, and not just teaches sort of the mind, just inside, but also sort of, I learned something about this through my body even, which is, I think, a one-stop shop that is not being utilized.
Now, you have a mess of kids of your own.
I do.
Right?
A passel.
Yeah.
Passel.
The Mehan home,
Which
I
is an
guess.
indeterminate number, a passel.
Is that in the glossary?
No.
The Mehan home is crowded.
Agreed.
And one of the observations I made, a kind of a curious observation about children's literature, is how many great children's authors did not have children. Dr. Seuss, no kids. Margaret Wise Brown, author of Goodnight Moon, like the most popular board book ever,
Right.
no kids. The authors of Curious George, no kids. C.S. Lewis, author of the beloved Chronicles of Narnia, no kids. I mean, at a certain point, this is, is there a competitive advantage if you're a children's writer not to have kids of your own? But I can also picture you road testing this at home. And were you reading these poems to your kids and refining them? Did you get any suggestions from them?
Oh, yeah.
How did that work?
Yeah, so the big worry was, is it delightful for children? I mean, I like it, but, like adults like it, but is it right for kids? And so it was very important to me to see my own children like laugh and, find the mammals amusing and the rhymes and be able to memorize them, and my kids started memorizing them. I also took it out, not only do I have a passel, but a number of my siblings have a bunch of kids too. So I road tested it with them, and I road tested it with other people's families. And so, yeah, it was very important to me. Also, they were weighing in on certain things. A few times I'd say, okay, read this poem. What's a mammal that I should mix into this mammal, this image? And at one point, just randomly, they picked one. I kind of don't want to say which one it is, but they just shouted out a mammal that they liked. And I said, that's actually a symbol of poetic verse in Roman literature. Like, whoa, and then suddenly it starts to fit into all of the wider themes too, and I just laughed. I was like, and it's just a awesome fuzzy animal that my kids love. So they're like, sweet, having something that's simple and childlike, but that is also works. And out of the mouths of babes, a number of times my kids made the book way better.
Did you ever get like, Uncle Matt, your poem for the letter R just doesn't work for me?
I don't know if I could say that. I got to catch someone's eye. Am I allowed to say this one? Yeah, there was the very.
That kid was grounded.
Yeah, the very first attempt at reading one of the poems has I start out laughing about hard words and how you shouldn't foist them on people right away, and that's the Ango, which is literally they're having a fight about whether you should say the full name of this mammal or just call it the Ango, and the full name is the Ango grobulguncolunxtus.
Why?
Yeah, right. Like scientific names and truth, that you have to get all the truth out right away, as opposed to poetry, which says, why don't you start with things that are pleasant and delightful and move people along in stages to the truth, right? That's what myth is, right? Myth is an image, mythical mammals. It's images that lead you to the truth, right? So that's like one of the thematic introductions, but it is, the Ango has but little fame because folks hate its proper name. Ango grobulguncolunxtus has a ring that most find unctuous. 2 hard words. My sister was like, I messed that up in front of my kids, and my kids laughed at me, and I'm like, good, that's hilarious, that's what I wanted, But I said, okay, I learned, and so in the introduction, I warn families, hey, there are hard words in here, and it's good to flub the funky words. You can look them up in the glossary if you want, but you don't need to know every word. right? Just like you don't need to know everything in life to learn a lot. And so there's actually something I think about, we don't talk about this, we talk about wisdom and the beard and the sort of, high and mighty man on the mountain. But there is the laughing philosopher, right? Democritus, like humor, that you don't know everything, Socratic ignorance. So you can just read through something and say, well, I don't know what the heck that guy, I don't know what that word is. Like, we'll work on it later, right? And that's what I want the book to be, is you can read it again and again, and it gets deeper and deeper, but you don't get everything the first time. So
You mentioned George Orwell earlier. Orwell was an advocate of what he called Anglish, which is English but with an A. And he said things like we should use common language when we're trying to communicate things. And so a word like ornithology drove him nuts, which is the Latin word for what? The study of birds, right? But he said we should just call it bird lore. Call it bird lore, which is, my gosh, that's down home, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you're Hillsdale College, you might have a class in ornithology. You'll never have a class in bird lore at Hillsdale, but it sounds so much more hoity-toity to say ornithology, right?
Well, and that's one of the things. The Ango, by the end, it says, hey, shut your mouth and use Ango, please, right? That's my first poem. It's like, don't say Ango grabu gunkalungstis. That's dumb. So 100% with
You can
Orwell.
count on my not saying that.
Yeah, right, 100%. Don't worry about it. There's probably 3 people in the room who could say it properly, right? And they've been
I
practicing.
think there's one.
Well, my wife, I think, has got
okay.
it down now.
But you make her.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Family business. She, no, not her. Sorry. Thank you. I love you. The Ango poem starts with, hey, be quiet. Use $1 words, right? But that's not the whole story. Because if you just leave it there and it's all just common bird lore, folk wisdom, right? Then you actually don't have people that are capable of going all the way down the rabbit hole into the difficulties of the search for wisdom, right? You have to have ornithologists, right? Because science is good and knowledge is good. But you also have to be able, the good mother wit, was what Chaucer called it, that poetry teaches, to switch modes, to be in a very highfalutin mode. Like, you can do that, but then you can also like talk and be normal, right? And not sound like a weirdo, right? So that ability to switch modes, right? And to be able to, yeah, I can do Ango grabu gunkalungstis if I got to, right? For certain things, right? In the right place at the right time. But I also know how to switch modes. And Machiavelli talks about this all the time, like new modes and orders. Well, it's way older than Machiavelli. Like, this is back Ciceronian rhetoric, the liberal arts tradition of being modal, like being able to speak in different ways. It's a fundamental task that poetry teaches, and I'm trying to bring it back. We're getting the band back together,
So we're going to move to the audience participation phase in just a moment, but a couple questions about what you do in your normal life. You're a teacher at the Heights. What is the Heights? What do you teach?
So at the Heights, I'm the director of the Robert Jackson Scholars Program for the seniors, which is a class they do a 30 to 40 page research thesis and then defend it for an hour before a semi-hostile panel with questions from the public.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's great.
For you.
Yeah, it is, actually. I get to learn a lot because I have to go on all these new research programs. And then I teach history of Western thought. It's a course I helped design, like sort of Plato to NATO sort of journey through great books. And then I also teach U.S. history, and then I teach an American lit class where we also bookend and cheat with, we do the Odyssey at the end for reasons I won't explain here, but it's an awesome book. And then we do a Shakespeare play at the beginning. So a lot of different humanities courses.
And you also teach here at the Kirby Center. So what is your connection to Hillsdale College? What do you do with the college?
So Worsham Teaching Fellow, I work with, under, and for Matt Spalding here. And then I teach the Washington Hillsdale Internship Program. So students come from Hillsdale, the undergrads come, and they have internships here, and I teach a literature course. And then I also run seminars for young professionals on philosophy, rhetoric, poetry, these sorts of liberal arts. We do Shakespeare plays, we do Cicero's on friendship and practicing the art of friendship. And then I also help out with the Coffee with the Classics program Hillsdale has for Capitol Hill staffers in the Capitol building.
She's like always teaching.
Yeah, that's right.
Always
All my
teaching.
life.
Yeah, it's like those always repping, those basketball shirts. He's always teaching.
ABT, always
Yeah,
be teaching.
exactly. Say who you are and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Tim Carney. I'm a Heights dad. I read the book, I loved it, and I love the sort of Straussian multi-level thing that you're doing there, because one of the things when you have a lot of kids is you realize this world...
This is such a Hillsdale event.
Tim's a plan.
Yes. This world isn't built for people to show up with kids of varying different levels of ability. Even half the swimming pools don't let you have, somebody in the kiddie pool and someone in the big pool. This book appealed to all my kids on different levels. But sometimes I needed somebody at the next level, like, you or somebody with I wasn't at the highest level. And particularly this guy here, the couple, the pink and the blue ball.
Tale of the Tanglers.
There was a lot of action and imagery going on in that. I had some hints as to what was going on. Can you just talk about the Tanglers?
Yeah, the Tale of the Tanglers, the letter T poem is, in one sense, it's essentially about family life in general and the incredible struggles that parents have to raise children. And I don't mind revealing at least one of many, many stupid puns throughout this book. This tangless task will be their own, right? It's the thankless task of parenting. And my hope is that parents read it and just laugh out loud at these two limbless parents that they have to climb a mountain in order to have a family. And it's actually quite difficult to raise a family if you've never tried. I recommend it, but it does take some effort. But they don't have any limbs, and the bull has to literally climb an entire mountain range from the sea without any arms or legs. And the mother Tangless has to dig a den without any arms and legs. And Limbless does so with her face, right? So it's just this horrible, difficult thing, which, in a certain sense is, me empathizing with my wife's travails in raising our children. But
Because you're never home, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You're teaching other people all the time, yeah.
But so that's, in one sense, that's one of the things that the Tale of the Tangless is doing, is just an homage for parents to see, hey, it's hard. I know it's hard. Stick with it. It's very difficult, but it's our way. There isn't another way. Raising children with effort is the way, and here it is, redepicted for you as natural as can be. I think that in and of itself is a serviceable image for people to see and have.
So buck up, Tim Carney.
That's right.
And
It's on, Tim.
keep being a dad. Okay, got it. Another question.
Hi, Mr. Mehan, thank you. Yeah. So you said you teach the Odyssey, and you're talking about the need for poetry in our society to kind of have a bit of a rebirth. So I'm wondering what you think of something like Emily Wilson's recent translation of the Odyssey that is kind of in more updated modern language. Do you think that's like a step in the right direction for this sort of thing, or what were your thoughts on that?
I only just started reading, and you did a full interview,
Emily
and
Wilson.
I listened to the podcast, so yeah.
Emily Wilson, who was on the Great Books podcast
Yeah.
this summer,
Yeah, it's almost
talking
like-
about the Odyssey.
I almost want to let him answer the question. I'm reading it now to decide whether actually it'll be the edition that we do this spring. I don't want to make a prejudgment about the work, but I tend to use Fitzgerald because it translates the line in a line of poetry, so you actually get access into the Greek dithyrambic nature of the poem. It's a fancy $10 word. The poet, what he does in a line is translated there in that line, so you can make more judgments about what the poetry's doing in translation. So I tend to like those kinds of more strict, lyrically rigid poetry because I really like being able to get involved in the mind of the poet and what they're sharing with me. And the more access I have to their choices of lineation is really important to me. But that's just
Exactly. I am not going to let you get out of this room without explaining why I teach the Odyssey in American Lit. Homer was Greek. Give us your elevator pitch for how you justify that.
Yeah, so Mr. Mehan's mildly amusing, I'm going to do it indirectly. Mr. Mehan's mildly amusing mythical mammals, I was told by a number of people, don't do that. Do not have a long, hard-to-say title. People will hate you for it. And I said, well, I don't care. It's going to be fun, and it's going to be woolly, and it's going to have my name in it because I want it to be something friendly, even if it means it's a little imperfect. I like that. The English tradition, the Anglophone tradition, the American tradition has always been some imperfections, right? It's not Versailles. The orange tree isn't cut like a cube, like on the continent. It's a little woolly in our gardens, right? So I like a curriculum that's not perfectly thematic.
Even Homer nods, someone
Right,
once
exactly.
said, right?
Thank you. Yeah, well said. And,
That's an allusion to a piece of literature.
2 pieces,
Well,
3 pieces,
actually, you're
4
right,
pieces
yeah.
of so that's my Jade's trick, as Shakespeare would say. But the other reason is it's a fundamental text beneath the Moby Dick. So you're not going to read Moby Dick very fruitfully, which they do the next year. So it's kind of preparation for that. But also, that is the poem of self-government. Right? It's all about speech acts and being shrewd and having a good wit and realizing when someone's blowing smoke, right? And Odysseus the liar, or the Odysseus the man of many turns, right? That's actually an incredible education in citizenship. And so my U.S. history and literature core class that's merged together does a lot of primary sources. We do an American narrative, but we also pick literature that's designed to shape citizens to have the kind of wit to see a hawk from a handsaw, a tyrant from a just ruler, and that's in short supply. So I think the Odyssey does a good job there.
Another question. We got one there.
Thank you. My name's Todd Wiggins, and I appreciate I want to talk about your illustrations because they are striking and well composed and obviously beautifully executed. So may I ask you, if at all, who are the influences? I think of Rockwell only because that's a classic portraiture artist that has great context and history in his conceptions, but I'd like to ask you if there's anyone in particular in the, say, recent past that you may have been compared to.
Yeah, so I didn't do the illustrations, and I almost don't want to answer for John, because John will just go, me and don't, you know. But I can give you this, that the Boston School and a lot of the realist impressionist painters, this school is somewhat new in that it tries to take the impressionists, which we can name names, and the realists, and put them together into a kind of, so that's one in terms of the artistic craft that John studied, John Foley. But within each of the paintings, we try to have different artistic quotes, and different ones quote different ones. This is actually that one there, the Colvano, the letter C, which is that poem, and this painting are about the sort of the pedigree of the Greek tradition and the Greco-Roman tradition of poetry. But that's actually based upon an impressionist painting called Mount Helicon, which is, if you don't know what Mount Helicon is, it's actually the birthplace of the Muses Hesiod writes about. And the Muses are complicated, right? They're the 9 daughters of Zeus and memory, right? So God and your own mind mixing together inspirationally. But they also say, we lie, but we tell truth when we want, right? So one of the things poetry does is it's images that can be deceptive, but actually trains you to think about a world that doesn't always give you the truth right away, right? You have to think carefully and prudently about what's in front of you. So we chose that painting as a referent because it's thematically helpful for the depth of poems. So we try to do that with the paintings throughout.
We had a question back, I think, if someone still has it.
This will be our last question.
One more question.
Thank you. Matt, how are you? You mentioned just now that all of the mammals are combinations except for one, and I'm going to guess in a book like that's not happenstance. So what's the mammal that's not a combination, and why isn't he or she
Yeah,
a combination?
it's right there. It's actually the Las Vaquitas. The vaquita is actually an endangered species in the Gulf of Cortez, Gulf of Mexico, Baja, south of California and Mexico. There's only probably about 12 of them left. And it's the smallest of all the cetaceans. The babies are the baby whales. Their babies are the size of a loaf of bread. People call them sea pandas. They're impossibly cute, but they're probably going to die.
That's so sad.
It is, yeah.
They sound adorable, but that's not a mythical mammal then.
It will be soon, I think. Yeah, I really do. But I put it in there for two reasons. One, as a final challenge, because if you pay attention, you read the glossary, and you come to understand what the vaquita is, and if you listen to the lullaby, which we produced a beautiful version. It's going to go in the audio book. But I actually, in the book, it's an illustrated score of the song that I wrote because I wanted people to see song and poetry as bound together, which I think is another important thing that needs to be rediscovered. But it's a very sad, plaintive little lullaby that I actually wrote while nursing a sick child when I was supposed to be writing a completely different poem about this. But then I had to shift gears because I had 2 days of a sick kid, so I couldn't write because my wife was out of town and having a wonderful time. No, it's also thematically, the book is, right, there's a challenge of sadness. I mentioned it a couple times. That is a challenge of sadness, is things that get lost due to human error that can't be brought back, right? Gone forever. An extinct species is a perfect example, and it's about mammals, so it's a good one. That's actually a serious thing. Like, hey, you screw something up, and you can't get it back. It's gone forever. Well, how do you handle that problem, right? So implicitly, the vaquita works on a number of levels for the book. And it is a beautiful creature, and we're donating a small portion of the proceeds to help recovery efforts, but I don't know if that, it might be to help some other endangered species or something.
How can they not buy the book now? You'll help save the what is it called?
The vaquita.
You'll help save the vaquita if you buy the book.
Yeah. And it is worth noting that, the conservative side of things oftentimes doesn't talk about ecology and the environment very much, but it is something that most of us actually care about, and that we have common ground with people outside of our group that shares everything in common or a lot more in common. And so it's always good to sort of remind people of the things we have in common with those outside our group to try to knit things back together, which is good to find common ground.
Okay, Matt Mehan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So